welcome to another episode of the Evolution Exchange Tech Diversity Podcast. How are we all today? How's everyone feeling?
Good.
Yeah? Excited for the talk?
Yes.
Me too. I wanted to mention to the listeners that today is a bit of a special day as I'm recording live in person from Telia, Oslo. Now, I've been here for a couple of days meeting a number of different companies, amazing customers that I work with, and thought, why not bring 3 people together plus myself to discuss a shared passion of diversity and inclusion. So I'm going to now introduce you to the 3 guests I'm with today, and what I'm going to ask is who you are, what you do, and also what you're passionate about. So Christina, we'll come to you first.
Oh, wow. Yes, my name is Christina Simakova. I'm currently working as engineering manager or Android manager at Shortcut. We make apps. For those who doesn't know, I have around 20 direct reports, all my favorite Android developers I really love. That's me. And my passion, everything basically. I like to travel. Obviously, I talk about diversity as well. And I'm very passionate about augmented reality. So,
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you can always ask me about that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different one. I like it. And Patience, we'll come to you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Patience Allen. I work as a manager in Telia right now, and I love people. I find people fascinating and interesting and complex, and so working with people in any way, shape, or form is what really gets me going. I'm an extrovert. Matches.
Nice. And Jennifer?
I'm Jennifer Verino, and I'm an American living in Oslo, and that right there sets me up for diversity, having a different viewpoint than the people that I'm living around. And I'm basically a communication specialist. I am a freelancer, so that means that I'm into different companies, into different projects. Again, diversity from a different angle, seeing lots of different ways of doing things. And my core tool is basically writing in all shapes and forms, copywriting, UX writing, really whatever my clients need. I also lead creative projects and communications projects. And then I guess I would say if I had to name a passion, it's, discovering new things, whether that's about people or whatever, adventure, basically. To show you what I mean, in the past few years, I've been dipping my toe into virtual reality.
Nice. What do you like about it?
Well, it is literally like seeing things through a different viewpoint. It's well known for empathy, that almost to the point of the people who work with it, I think see it as like that empathy thing, like it's over-talked. But as it expands to being relevant to wider audiences, I think that's really its main selling point.
Yeah, it sounds cool. Definitely. Okay, well, thank you for that. It's nice to kind of get to know each other a little bit more. So as I mentioned, we're all here to discuss diversity, and I know we've all brought a few discussion points or subtopics that we're here to kind of dig a little deeper into. So what I'm going to do is kind of go around the room with what your topic or discussion point was. I'd love if you can share it with the listeners, share it with the panel, and then we'll dig deeper into what everybody else thinks as well. So again, Christina, I'm going to come to you first. Yours was a really, really, really interesting point of how to fix the culture rather than just the statistics when it comes to diversity.
Yeah, I brought it up because I see now several companies. First of all, diversity and inclusion are very important, and showing that you have so many diverse people in your company by statistics, that's great. But what I see now is that people are actually just looking at statistics and what it actually means. For example, let's say we have a bigger company where you have just the development department with only men and marketing department with only women. Is that diversity? Even though on statistics it is, let's say, 50-50, but is that real diversity? Is that real inclusion? Because your department is maybe only females or only males. It doesn't count, to be honest. And the second part is that, for example, when we take the startups and maybe investors will tell them, you know what, you don't have any women on your board. And then they're running around and just trying to find that woman that will be there like a checkpoint. You know, I don't want to be a checkpoint. I want to be there because I can contribute. Yeah, so that's my point. Just my point is for the companies, be careful what you are doing and how it's shown, maybe.
Being truly interested in it rather than just the way it looks.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, I would rather maybe have a company that has, let's say, 15% women in the company, but then it feels included. Then I see in all the different teams there is one woman or someone international working. So to get these diverse points in the teams. So statistics are not always showing what is going on.
I also think it taps into the integration versus assimilation way of looking at things. Some things that I've worked on, it's definitely where I see that the people who are different in that situation, it was internationals in Norway, looking at they had to assimilate, basically act exactly like a Norwegian. Instead of, showing their full value for the company. And that was not understood by the company, but it was obvious to me from the outside.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies don't know what they're asking for, really. They don't understand the consequences of it. And they use statistics because they don't know how else to measure it.
Yeah.
And they don't know how else to hold us who are hiring managers accountable.
That's true.
And so I think statistics are useful as one part of a larger campaign or plan or strategy. And it's the larger campaign or plan or strategy that I think is often missing.
Yes, exactly. What I'm afraid of is that bigger company, they have this wonderful vision that to have the diverse and wonderful place for us to work in. And then it goes down to OKRs and all this. And we as the managers, we try to meet those. And sometimes without thinking what it actually means, what we actually need to do, rather than just checking this box that now we have 5 women or 5 internationals, or what is diverse for you, for your company.
Yeah, and I think diversity is a double-edged sword in companies that have very few people, because often you get that one person in who's the first person of whatever type they are, in whatever diverse way they are diverse, and they just create a lot of noise because everybody else is homogeneous in an opposite way. And there's no cultural transition. There's no learning back and forth about what you can expect and what you should be prepared for and how you should be more open-minded. And that's very difficult for people to just do naturally without being aware of, I need to be aware of this. So oftentimes that is seen as a failure in a company, and then they don't want to hire other diverse candidates because they just don't have enough diversity to be getting the value add, and they're not taking advantage of the special skills or perspectives the person's bringing because they're trying to fit him into a square, a round peg into a square box or a square hole. And so that causes a lot of problems. And if you're not aware of that, like going into it, you're just going to see the bad sides.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a little bit more prepared and a little bit more aware, then you're like, this is just a transition period. This is just growing pains.
Yeah. I think it's also work for us as a hiring manager to make sure that we meet this person with the open minds as well and prepare our culture as well. And the second point, I think, which is very important, is that we are very desperate for developers and like anyone. And it's important to hire people that fit your culture as well. So sometimes it's painful to say no to a good candidate, but you feel like, okay, maybe he or she doesn't fit into the culture.
How do you do your onboarding? I would think that could be a way of addressing that. How could somebody, look at it with fresh eyes? How could they potentially become one of you? Is there a process around that? Like what you said, you have to say no to good people even though you desperately need them.
Yeah, I mean, coming to onboarding, we actually have now a quite long onboarding process where people meet almost everyone in the company. So they understand who is what, doing what, and so on, and they have different activities. If we talk about interviewing process, how we see that it's not a culture fit, I don't know, usually we ask questions about like, what do you expect? How do you want your everyday life to be? And maybe, let's say someone asks for, I don't know, they only want to work in this particular area, then maybe it will be really hard for us to find, as a consultancy company, to find projects to fit these needs, basically. So,
yeah, that sounds like a very practical challenge rather than an attitude challenge.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think overall, I have not seen that many candidates that wouldn't fit the culture because, I mean, also in Shortcut, we are so international. Only in my team, I have 7 different nationalities, and they are like, we are all living together, and I'm happy to see how it all works out. So we are very like kind of diverse and different group of people. But I can see some companies might have a challenge if, let's say, they have only been Norwegian speaking people working and suddenly you need to hire someone from abroad and they only speak English. It can be a challenge, right? Because you are used to talk your language at lunch, on the meetings, and suddenly you have this switch. We had this in Shortcut before. There was, I remember I was I think one of the few ones that were not from Norway, but I could speak Norwegian. And then there was a switch. Now we only use English. Now we are very international.
How long did that time take?
So in 2015, it was Norwegian only speaking, I would say. And now we are like so super international. I think it took a year transition, overall transition, but also being a smaller company from the beginning, it's much easier to do the switch.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It kind of resonates with me. The point of the statistic thing is knowing your company's why and the values that your company holds. So then you know that you're definitely hiring for the right reasons rather than, like you said, trying to fit and tick a box for the sake of it. It's definitely interesting. Nice. Has anyone got anything else to add on that point?
No, but I do think, statistics are a crutch. And most of the statistics you see out there are measuring gender, or maybe if you're lucky, they might measure age. They may measure nationality. But I see very, very few statistics that are being used to measure other types of diversity. People with physical limitations or, whatever else. There can be a whole range of ways people can be diverse. And I think that is often forgotten for the sort of the big 3, the age, gender, nationality. Those are the easiest ones to spot, and you don't feel like you might have to be sensitive about it so much.
I was going to say, do you think it's because some of these, like you said, physical ability, I don't know, like your sexual orientation, they are quite sensitive subjects? So that could be a factor that affects it.
Yeah, and religion, you know, that could be one.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing with diversity and inclusion. You need to figure out how to broach those other areas in a way that is uplifting and supports people and doesn't just put them in a box and leave them there. And that's a lot of training that I think companies could really spend some time and effort on that would make, you know, conflict management just go out the window. You get rid of that because people would understand each other more and empathize more. But it would also open up their hiring and what types of profiles they could hire and what types of places they could hire from as well, like the channels where they get people from. I think would be a little bit more diverse as well, because sometimes our hiring channels are not diverse at all, and thus we get what is there because
you don't get any more diverse, do you? Yeah. Okay, and that thing you mentioned there about kind of age, gender, brings us on nicely to your topic, Jennifer, which was age within diversity and ageism. So yeah, tell us more about that.
I think it's a very, very interesting way of looking at things because it's relevant to everybody, no matter what their background is. Even a baby is aging, right? So, and we want to age because otherwise you're dead. So, and I personally really like a mix of generations. Having colleagues or friends who are a good bit older and a good bit younger brings me a lot of great stuff. But when I moved to Norway, it really hit me in the face that it was looked at differently here because in the U.S. it's a bit more private. You know, people might know your age, but definitely in a professional setting, it's not like advertised, for example, in your CV or resume. You will see in newspaper articles here or somebody's bio in a very public setting, it's like seen as a defining factor, like it will be the first thing listed. And I found that kind of shocking. I don't know that they advertise this way in recruiting anymore, but I've definitely heard it said where people who are looking to hire will say a very specific age range. That's all they're looking for. And obviously you're going to be cutting yourself out of a really interesting potential pool by having blinders on. One experience that I had, I was frustrated with something that I was hearing about that, and I said, all they want is the ideal age. And I happened to be talking to a researcher who works within diversity and in businesses, and she said, oh, what's that, 35? And yeah, that was exactly what she meant. Not too old, not too young, perfect in this setting. And this is all in Norway. So this is really foolish for many, many reasons. I looked up here, again with the Norway viewpoint, the former prime minister who just went off, Erna Solberg, she said in, I think it was 2017, that in the long run, it will be more important for a sustainable welfare society that older people work longer than that we open up a new oil field. Maybe we can call older people the new oil. And for Norway, that's a major statement. And I don't know that minds are changing. I hope they are, but clearly somebody has realized in at least the upper levels of the political world here, government, that it's a generational shift thing. You have the baby boomers aging out, and at least the older ones retiring, and the younger generations are smaller. And they recognize we can't support our welfare society if there's not enough people working. If you broaden it to a more international context, it's also that you lose phenomenal competence. As I I've definitely heard people are talking about this in many, many different countries. It's definitely not just a Norwegian issue. So to me, I'm just interested in opening minds. I feel like the conversations I've normally heard about this are about younger people feeling discriminated. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but that they have a hard time getting in the market because every job posting will expect experience already. They're like, well, how do you get that experience? And I know there are challenges there. Anyway, that's what interests me.
Yeah, I think it does still exist in many, many places. I mean, there's the assumption in Norway that once you hit 50, it's going to be harder for you to find a job. And that may be true, and it may not be true. It kind of depends on the individual and depends on the context and the industry and what's going on there. But, sort of the benefit packages and the workforce, the employment laws and everything sort of takes it for granted that after 50, it will be harder for you to find a job. And that I find really interesting because 50 is really, really young. You've got at least a decade, if not two, before you're going to retire, depending on what kind of person you are, but that's a really long time, a lot of knowledge and experience. And by the time you're 50, you have maybe 25 years of experience. But so half of your career life is still ahead of you. And that's where I think people tend to look at numbers rather than look at the individual. And that's, again, statistics, right?
Yeah.
And, some of them will be like, oh, well, older people get sick more. That's the argument they'll use. And I'm like, well, what about people who have small children? I'm not knocking them. They should definitely be in the workforce, and I'm all for them. But, statistically speaking, they get sick more often than people over 50. But the assumption is that people over 50 are the category that gets ill more often. And so it's there's sort of a societal prejudice, and again, not just in Norway, that, older people, you're losing your ability to think quickly. You're losing your ability to move quickly. You're losing your desire to learn. And for some people, that may be true, right? But it's one of those things where once you start putting people in buckets, that's where you lose out. And diversity and inclusion is a difficult topic there because diversity, you are putting labels on people, right? But you're trying to do it to uplift, to raise them up and to get positives out of it rather than as a label to bring them down. So I think it's fascinating with younger people as well. Everybody wants, they got to have 2 to 3 years of experience minimum. That's entry level. I'm like, no, that is not the definition of entry level. Entry level is no experience.
They end up being in internships, which I know in some countries they're expected to work for free, and that's its whole other group of challenges with that. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. No, I just want to add, my mother is 58, yeah. And she's in better physical shape than me. And she's going swimming and yoga and everything else. And she's working. And I hope she will continue working because I cannot imagine that she would be retired or something at 50 because she's so young. I see how young she is, both soul and everything, and she's also taking now online courses. You don't believe, today she's taking video editing course. Mother, what? So I'm very happy how we have evolved as humanity, that actually we are also learning all the time, not only people in their 30s, 40s, but also 50s and 60s and probably 80s as well. So I hope as many people will stay in the workforce, help the juniors to get better, get their point as well as I grew up in a different area than now the 20s, right? So I can give my point of view how we did, why we didn't have mobile phones, like we did something else than that. But so we have always different points of views. We have different past, and we have different opinions. And I think everyone has to be included. And I have several people at work that I know they're 50 or over 50, and I think they can work 20, 30 more years, and they have, I think they have so much to say and to do and to contribute. So I hope we will solve this problem of like that someone will be afraid of losing their job, and that they will not be able to find a new job.
Yeah, I think that's key there, is the finding a new job. So if you're 50, you're in a job, you've been there for a while, you would think that they're going to keep you as long as you're performing well. But I think the idea of, could I find another job? I think that's where there's a question mark on it, and that's where this conversation becomes really important, because you shouldn't have to feel like you can't. But is there anything that you could think of that companies could do to encourage that, or discourage that feeling of, I'm not going to be able to find something new?
I think you often believe what you see. So it's not about talk as much. It's about, when I look around the room and around the company, do I see anybody who looks older than me at whatever age one is, or do I see people who look younger than me? So are they showing that they value people who are older? Are they showing that they value people who are younger? Or when you look around the room, is pretty much everybody within the same 10 years of each other? And, some people certainly, I myself, I dye my hair to make it look, make myself look younger. But, you can still tell. You can still tell I'm not 20. You can still tell I'm sort of maybe in the older group. But I think, when they see people who are being valued for the work that they're doing at whatever level and with a variety of ages, then you're not going to fear for your job. And if you see that in multiple companies, and if, like in the advertising, the people who represent the company are all different ages, or if the people at stands or at seminars or wherever the company is showing, here are we and doing recruitment, they have a variety, and it's not just all the brand new 20-year-old interns who are at the stand, then it's going to be more believable. And I think people will go, oh, okay, cool. They are a company that has a lot of, openness to what skills different people bring at different periods in their career.
And writing, there's a approach, show it, don't tell it. And that, I think, fits in really nicely with what you're saying. It becomes more credible if you're actually doing it and not just talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. It's a really interesting topic, especially flipping it from the younger person to the older person. Like you said, we always hear, younger people can't get into jobs. But no, thank you for that. And then patience, your kind of topic was, how does gender affect salaries? And I know before the podcast we were talking about, was it a study that you saw, and kind of, tell us about that, because it's interesting.
Yeah, this was a study I read a while back that was based on the U.S. market. So it may or may not be relevant to Norway, but I just thought it was a very interesting thing. And it was talking about a couple different industries, and one of them was nursing, where nursing is, in the U.S., very predominantly female. And the salaries for nurses are, they're higher now because of COVID, thank you. But they, at the time they were a bit lower. But as soon as men started becoming nurses, and they did this study in a couple different hospitals and did the research, where they noticed that when that hospital started hiring male nurses, the salaries for nurses went up because the men were coming in and men get higher salaries. And that is not a statement I'm making as a fact, but this is sort of the theory underneath it. And so all the nurses started getting higher salaries because there were men in there. But when it was predominantly female, it was lower. And they also looked at some other industries that are predominantly male-dominated, IT being one of them, where the salaries were quite high. But then as soon as women started coming in and it started getting more diversified gender-wise, the salaries started going down. And it was a fascinating study, horrific, absolutely horrific study from a women's point of view, but a fascinating study to understand that there are other factors at work, at least in the U.S., when it comes to how salaries are defined and what the value of a task is. And so when you only get one gender, one type of candidate, you value it a different way than when you have a heterogeneous group. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So I'd be interested in hearing anybody else's thoughts on that, or if you have experiences with that type of stuff.
Yeah, I can add a little bit. I remember I was in the group before where we were like female developers, and many women that are there, when they became managers, they would say, "Girls, please ask for more money. Don't be afraid." And I didn't understand until I became engineering manager myself. So I talked to people about salaries. And I also read a little bit of statistics and research on that. So women or female developers, I'm talking about developers, are less likely to ask for a salary raise than a man.
But I kind of question that because I ask for raises all the time. And yeah, I'm not a developer, but I am female.
Yeah.
So
maybe we're not in that statistics, right?
Yeah, maybe not. But, I think there's a lot of men that also don't ask for raises. But I think they're getting them even though they don't ask for them.
Let's say, I think also from my experience, if you're men, even they are happy with the raise, they would ask for more. It's just what everything, all the articles say, ask for more. And that's valid. If everyone asks for more, why shouldn't you? Yeah. And but I think female co-workers, maybe they're more shy. I have no idea. I am the same. Come on. I kick myself to ask for more. I'm not the statistics. I should ask for more.
I have so many ideas coming out with you all talking about this. One example that comes to mind is how they dealt with this a little bit in the U.S., and it had to do with buying a car. So not about salaries, but I think the concept could transfer. And I can't remember the maker, but they wanted to appeal to women specifically, and so they came out with a fixed price for their car. And so women could go in and they didn't have to do all the negotiating. It's what it was, and that's just what it, and this company, wish I could remember the name, did really well. And so I kind of, hearing some of what you're saying, was why can't there just be more of that somehow? I know in the government here, they have certain ranges that they make really clear. So kind of if you're at X level, it pays within this range. I mean, everybody doesn't want to be like the government, but the certain amount of salary transparency would be beneficial. I don't know if there's, excuse me, if there's some way to get that here. The information tends to be a little more open in this society, I think.
Well, I mean, you certainly have the trade unions that have salary statistics and stuff for different titles. So you have that here, but then you have to be a member of that particular trade union for those particular types of jobs, right? So if you tend to go across, you're switching from being a developer to being a manager, maybe you're switching trade union areas, and so you'd have to, do further research, join a different trade union to get those type of statistics. But that doesn't always help you, because sometimes, like within companies, the salary ranges are vastly different for the same job. I mean, I know at a former place where I worked, my salary as a manager was 6 levels below all the other managers in the other departments that started at the same time as me. So I thought, as soon as I found that out, I was like, wait a second here, what's going on? So I said, well, okay, is it because I don't have the education? No, I have a master's degree, as they do. Is it because I don't have the responsibility for the budget? No, my budget's larger than theirs. If I don't have the responsibility for the people, no, actually I have more people than they do. And like every sort of objective criteria was just like I either was equal or had more than the people hired at the same time as me. And like there was no thing of seniority because, they started at the same time. And so when it finally got down to it, and I was talking to my boss about it, and of course raised all these things for him, and he was like, well, it's just historically always been this way. And I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't historically here.
Not
this
anymore.
should be different. And he wasn't willing to bring it up. He just didn't want to do that kind of fight, and that wasn't his personality style and wasn't his strength. And so I just had to decide to leave, which I did. But it was one of those situations where I was like, wow, historical isn't a good precedent for this. Like if there's an objective reason.
Patients, were all those people men?
No,
they were discussion like that.
They were women as well. So it was just straight across the board. But sometimes I think that's a factor. Like just sort of the historical precedent. Like it's always been we pay less for, this department or for women or for this group of people or, so thus why would we pay more now?
There's a very old-fashioned point of view that people used to be more open about. Now it's not politically correct to say these kind of things, but it was looked at that men have to take care of a family, so of course you pay them more. Now that's not the reality anymore, but when you've got it in the system, as you said, patients, the historical structure or whatever, it's just bizarre.
Yeah.
It's difficult to change as well, isn't it, when, like you said, people are so set in their ways, and it's kind of, you need to bring an argument of why we would change it rather than let's just look at it for what it is. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I appreciate we're approaching the hour mark, but I know, Jennifer, when we were talking, we obviously mentioned the age diversity, but also kind of diversity and inclusion, how to get people on board without kind of using punishment. So yeah, that was like a subtopic we wanted to explore if we've got time. So tell us more about that.
Okay, we can throw it out there. Well, one thing that I like to talk about, I've even done short presentations on it, is looking at diversity and inclusion from a totally different angle, and that's that it's fun, not that it's something that you have to do. People respond much better if they if it's an attractive thing instead of something that they're forced into doing somehow with fines or being shamed or whatever. I mean, that's just human psychology, not unique to this. So, I've sort of looked at this from, baby steps are the way you can change things, and sort of examples that I have, they're really small. Some might sound absurd to somebody who wants major change. But like if you look at it from diversity, from that perspective, it's as simple as an individual can choose to read a book that is translated, or something that is somehow different from themselves. And if they don't like books, they can watch a movie with subtitles, or one that highlights as the main characters or themes something that they wouldn't do. And this is something they can do in their private time and make sure the style or something is one they really enjoy, so that it's a positive experience. And with inclusion, same sort of thing. They choose it. Like say they're at work and in the company lunchroom, if there's somebody who's sitting alone, they just, invite them over or chat with them in the hall or something really small that's a way of taking a step towards this. I heard about some really interesting research, coincidentally, just before I was coming in here that I thought was just fascinating, that the Harvard Business School had done, or rather someone using statistics from Harvard Business School, looking at forced diversity versus organic diversity, meaning they'd put people into different groups where they were randomly assigned to ensure diversity, and then in groups where they chose. There was different years where it was done that way, and the researchers had, hoped that the forced groups would be more subjective and would do better, but they found out that they didn't. And the ones that were organically chosen, which were probably not quite as diverse as the others. So they need to do more research on this, but I thought that pointed to the idea of what are people choosing on their own, and if we can just play with that a bit more, instead of the way the large majority of people talk about diversity and inclusion.
I agree with that. But I think also, one of the things that's a benefit from COVID is that they sort of ran out of content on the TV and the streaming services. So they're buying it from different countries. So you're getting a lot more diversity via the media. And I think that's one of the reasons why in Norway, everybody's like, oh, Americans, those aren't, you guys aren't immigrants. And I'm like, oh, yes, I am, actually. But it's because they see American TV all the time. And so seeing Korean TV or Nigerian TV or, these movies or these series or these streaming services from other countries, I think will make people more comfortable with those cultures in a way, what you're talking about. And I think that's one of the things that is just a spin-off of COVID because, there wasn't any content. So suddenly Netflix had to look somewhere else than the U.S. and, and look for other markets. So I think I feel that's helping. I know so much more about Korean society now from, but,
Yeah. And Christina, what do you think?
Yeah, I just heard about books and like how you can open your mind to it. I have not read the book, but I've heard about it, called The Invisible Women. It's basically presented the data how this world is created by men, not by men for men. And one of the examples is like piano, for example, is that it's actually created, the optimal size of your palm is 22, and obviously a lot of women have smaller palms. So that's why we're not that maybe good at piano. But so, for example, this book is just bringing some data and comparing different things, why maybe we are as women, if we talk about that, a bit different, and why we are maybe not suited to play piano. I'm just saying that, but and this is the book that was reviewed by a guy, and he was like, yeah, I didn't see that coming, but this book opened his mind, and I really want to read the book as well, because he brought up a few good examples about how we are and why the world is how it is right now, and how things work. And I think the books like that will open the minds for people why, for example, different cultures are different, and why some people shake the hand and someone don't want to shake the hand in different cultures. So yeah, I think reading books, watching TV shows about Korea will definitely open everyone's mind. Yeah, for sure.
No, it's a really interesting point. And I think it's nice that it's backed by studies, and you can kind of see, well, maybe we should be a bit more open-minded if this is a controlled environment and these are the results. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. Now, has anybody got anything else to add on any of the topics before we wrap up? Anything else we want to mention?
Well, I think one of the reasons why I think we're even raising these issues is because we're all sort of looking for how do we fix it? How do we improve the situation? And obviously the first step in solving anything is being aware of what is the actual challenge. What is the actual thing that you want to change? So I feel often that can be misconstrued, the awareness moment, and people get scared of that. They don't want to raise these issues because they feel like they're complaining, or that they feel like they're putting down the opposite side. And I think maybe we could start by just understanding that we're talking about these topics not to complain and be upset, but to sort of figure out what is the real problem here underneath this, and thus, okay, what needs to be done to change that in a positive way and get us to a more holistic state of being where we want to be. So I think that's something that maybe we're not always aware of ourselves when we're talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the reasons I enjoy talking about these things, is because people have so many differences of opinions, but just raising awareness, just talking about it is definitely a step in the right direction to, if some of the listeners here take one thing away, definitely worth it across the board. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else from anyone? No. Okay, well, thank you to Jennifer, Patience, Christina. It's been a really good talk, some really good insights in there. So, yeah, I wanted to just say thank you, and I hope the listeners enjoy listening.
Thanks.
Thank you.